Thoughts on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. First of all, the amount of attacks that have happened since 9/11 should show all of us, not just attacks in the UK, not just attacks in the States, not just attacks in Europe, but attacks globally by jihadist fanatics, should show all of us that just like when Jerry Adams said that the IRA hadn't gone away, and I think it was the mid-90s or the early 2000s, well, we can be absolutely sure that the ideas, the foot soldiers, and the will of the jihadists to basically take over the world. I mean, it seems insane, doesn't it, that in the 21st century, we've got a group of religious fanatics that want to take over the world and rule the world in a political religious system that they would call the Ummah, the Caliphate. They want a caliph and they want a caliphate, and they want that caliphate to cover the whole earth. That is the reality. And I think that's one of the things that I find very distressing and disturbing about the commentary in the media, the noises that are coming out of government sources both in the UK and the US after the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, which in itself, as people who remember 9/11 and remember the aftermath of 9/11 and how the US very, very successfully deposed the Taliban literally in weeks using massive air power, CIA operatives with large bags full of cash and large amounts of Afghan warlords called the Northern Alliance that just pushed on and pushed through very bravely, I might add, against the Taliban and really destroyed the Taliban state. And now, 20 years later, we're in a position where the Taliban are not just in control of Afghanistan, they are now being tacitly recognized by the great and the good in the West, or as I always say, the great and the not so good, because these people are neither great or good. But only yesterday, I think it was, a retired general, I think it was General Richards, I think his name was, the guy that did the successful operation in Sierra Leone, was saying we must engage with the Taliban. Second general I've heard saying that. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said we must engage with the Taliban. Biden's people are saying the same thing. And where does this idea come from? And I am convinced that this comes from, and I've said this before, this comes as a result of the appeasement of the IRA during the Good Friday Agreement, and also things that happened in South Africa and other peace processes around the world, where the people who were the terrorists were brought into government. Now, of course, I'm totally opposed to the Good Friday Agreement. At the time I wasn't, at the time I voted for it. Now I believe it was a massive mistake to give Sinn Féin and the IRA the power that they now hold in both sides of the Irish border. But that's another story, that's not for this video. But the reality is that despite the wickedness and the perversity of the terrorists of the IRA, they do not share the genocidal, apocalyptic, global vision that the jihadists do. They are not driven by a religious ideology. The driving force behind the IRA is to control the whole of Ireland, north and south. They don't believe in Northern Ireland. They don't believe it should exist. They want Ireland to be one unitary state. There's a lot of hypocrisy in what the IRA believe, but again, that's roughly what they claim that they want. And if they got that, they would supposedly be quite happy. But they're not going to try and conquer Scotland. They're not going to try and conquer England. They're not going to try and take over London. The difference is the people that we've just handed the Afghanistan over to will not be just satisfied with Afghanistan. Maybe some of the tribal warlords will, but the ideology that has been taught is just like communism. It is a global ideology. It is an internationalist ideology that wants to control and dominate the globe. That ideology has not changed. What has happened is there has been a gradual surrender to political Islamists. And remember, there was the thinking that there were violent Islamists and there were political Islamists. Well, their ideology is the same, and what they want is exactly the same. And there's been a massive surrender and appeasement to political Islamists. And now, even worse than that, in Afghanistan, we're seeing a complete surrender to violent Islamists. The Haqqani network, we are told, is joined at the hip with Al-Qaeda. There are other factions in the Taliban that, I mean, I think the president, or whoever, whatever they call him now, they're not going to call him the president, but the guy that's running Afghanistan, his son, as far as I know, was a suicide bomber. So these are people who are wedded to violence in the name of religion. They are jihadists to the very, very core. And how they can prevent Afghanistan becoming a space where terrorism can grow, it defies absolute logic. But as well as that, the lot of the people of Afghanistan is going to be incalculably worse than it was, even with all the horrendous stuff that was happening during the war, which incidentally was caused by the Taliban attacking people and attacking the Afghan army, attacking the Afghan police, attacking politicians. As bad as that was, the repression of women and people who don't share their religious ideology is unfathomable. I'm reading a book at the minute called First Casualty. It's about the CIA operation to oust the Taliban and to try and capture or kill Osama bin Laden. And it's a fascinating book because the doctrine that Biden is using now is exactly the same doctrine that Clinton was using in the 90s. That let's see if we can reach out to these people. Let's see if we can get some sort of peace process going with these people. Let's see if we can find an accommodation with some of these people. Let's see if we can find the less radical elements of these groups. And of course, when 9/11 happened, that was turned on its head. Bush came in and said, we're going to war, and destroyed the Taliban within a matter of weeks. And I believe that needs to happen again. I believe that the Western military, Britain, America, Western forces need to coalesce together, and they need to oust the Taliban from Afghanistan before they even get the chance to start launching terrorist attacks from their shores. Because what is happening in Afghanistan will have a direct impact on the streets of the United Kingdom. The same Pashtun tribes people that are engaged with the Taliban, that are involved in the Deobandi movement, those very same people are present in our country. Now, they might not be attacking our country at the minute, but if they believe the same ideology, if they believe in that same globalist vision, which we know they do, if you read Ed Hussein's book Among the Mosques, it's one of the things he's talking about is the fact that the jihadists, not just the jihadists, but many of the imams, many of the teachers in the mosques, not just Deobandi mosques either, believe in this idea of the caliphate and of domination of the globe by Islam. And of course, we've got to understand how this works, because in Islamic theology, you offer the people that you're conquering, you invite them to come to Islam, and if they refuse, you attack them. And that's actually what bin Laden did. But bin Laden invited the Americans to convert to Islam, and then he attacked them. That is Islamic doctrine. And this idea of the caliphate is not a small sect of Muslims who believe this. It's a large number of people in Western countries, in Middle Eastern countries, in fact, wherever you find Sunni Islam, and particularly the very conservative forms of Sunni Islam, you will find this ideology of the caliphate. So from 9/11 until now, okay, America hasn't been attacked in any serious genocidal way. There hasn't been a mass casualty attack yet, but it's not through want of trying. We've seen suicide bombs on the streets of London. Who would have ever thought that 20 years ago? That we would see suicide bombers blowing themselves up on the streets. And I'm not trying to be clever, but I was warning people about radical Islam in the 1990s. I was talking about it in church groups in Northern Ireland, and people looking at me like I had two heads. But the reality is, Anybody that has studied the history of the late 20th century and the early 21st century cannot come to any other conclusion that jihadism, Islamism, radical Islam, whatever you want to call it, is coming to a country near you, and it's coming with war and turmoil and death. And the fact that we've withdrawn from Afghanistan, and the fact that the way that we've withdrawn from Afghanistan is not just a tragedy for the Afghan people, and I believe it is, and I believe we should be concerned about that, because we betrayed those people, we betrayed those interpreters, we betrayed those soldiers that fought against terrorists on our behalf. We betrayed all those people. We betrayed our own servicemen who went there and shed their blood to stand against terrorism. We betrayed everybody that was involved in the conflict by the way that withdrawal has taken place. And the reality is, when you look at what the CIA did when they worked with the Northern Alliance, America, using small units of special forces and CIA and covert operatives, could have had a presence in Afghanistan that may have cost millions of dollars or whatever the price tag would have been, but they could have had a presence there that would have held the Taliban in check, held ISIS in check. Now, as far as I can see, we have no presence there. And what I really do fear, one of the fascinating things about this book I'm reading, called First Casualty, Clinton wanted to do a deal with the Taliban, according to this book. That the Democratic government, or the Democrat government in the United States under Clinton, one of their plans was to do a deal with the Taliban. And of course, you have all these rivalries within the CIA. You've got the CIA in Pakistan backing that idea, and you've got the CIA in Uzbekistan very much against that idea. So there's rivalry within these groups. But the idea was that, yes, let's just leave Afghanistan alone. Let's not just upset the apple cart too much. We'll be able to deal with them sooner or later. Let things settle down. That was the plan before 9/11 happened. So I think it can be very, very safely said that Clinton and his doctrine of negotiating with terrorists, which he probably formulated in Northern Ireland, in a very real way, led to the space that was allowed for Al-Qaeda to grow. And Biden, who no doubt was involved with Clinton in some way, shape or form, I'm sure he was, Biden has now put that into place as well, the same doctrine. Let's do business with them, let's talk to them, let's reason with these people. But you can't reason with the devil. You can't reason with an evil ideology. And of course, while this is happening, thousands of innocent people will be killed in Afghanistan. And I firmly believe that the war in Afghanistan was a right war, it was a just war. And I believe that everywhere that these terrorist states pop up, they should be taken on and they should be taken down. And I believe that's a price worth paying for Western security. And of course, people talk about blowback and this, that, and the other. Well, the people who are blowing back, the people who are pushing back against the West, these are the sort of immigrants that we don't want. The people that want to attack our country, they need to be made homeless. They need to be taken out of the country and they need to be deposited somewhere else. We don't want people in our country that are going to destroy our country. They need to be resettled to those areas of the world that they think are an Islamic utopia. They need to be sent there to live. If they want the caliphate, let them have the caliphate there, not in our country, or not on our watch. So my thoughts on 20 years after 9/11, I believe, relating to free speech, relating to the confidence that the West has in asserting itself and its power, the number of jihadis that we know are living in our countries, the way that Islamists have infiltrated all strata of society in the United Kingdom. I'm talking about people who believe in the caliphate. They're not carrying out violent acts, but they're politically trying to subvert our political system. You see them everywhere. You see them on the TV on a regular basis. I believe we're in a far worse position now than we were in 2001. And we're in a bad position then. The question is, what happens next? I believe at some point within the next 5 to 10 years, we will see a major uprising by radical Islamists in the United Kingdom. I genuinely believe that will happen. I believe others will try and take over a town, try and take over an area, and it will maybe be a test to see how the state reacts to that. But I think that is part of their doctrine, that when they get what they believe to be the numbers that they can take over, that they will take over. And in the meantime, the political Islamists will continually try and undermine Western democracy, try and undermine our values, try and devalue Western civilization. So what's the antidote to that? And I'm going to surprise you when I say this. The antidote to Islamism is getting back to the Christian foundations of the United Kingdom. Now, I'm not talking about being church-going, card-carrying evangelical Christians. Well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people realizing that the Christian history of this country, and this is why I get really angry with the radical atheists, not atheists that just aren't interested in religion, that's not the issue, but the radical ones that really oppose Christianity vehemently. They are either ignorant of the fact that Christianity is what made Britain great, that from the times of Cromwell onwards was when Britain got stronger and stronger and stronger. Same with the United States of America, built very, very firmly on the basis of Christian values, of the values of the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's what Western civilization and culture was built on. And it would do no harm for the people of the United Kingdom to at least look at that history, look at the texts of the Bible and what Christians believed in years gone by, and see if that is a better way to live than the hedonistic, self-serving, materialistic society that we live in today. And that is the counter to Islam, because the reality is truth will always overcome error. So there need to be several prongs to the attack on radical Islam and jihadism. First of all, it needs to be opposed politically. We need to make sure that the way that institutions have been subverted by Islamist groups is stopped. We then need to, in foreign fields where Islamists are planning terrorist attacks and carrying out terrorist attacks, they need to be opposed physically. And then in the United Kingdom, people that are unwilling to live by our rules, that want to destroy our country, that want to turn our country into a caliphate, they must be asked to leave and sent to whatever country they think is the perfect caliphate on the planet at the moment. And as well as that, the whole nation needs to turn back to Christian values, as does the United States and as does Europe. But they're my thoughts on what's happening in the world since 9/11. Remember, 40,000 terrorist attacks, 40,000 and counting, since 9/11 on a global basis. The global jihadist insurgency, as Majid Nawaz calls it, is still very much ongoing. And the West is not winning this war at the minute. It's not winning ideologically, because we have no ideology, because we have turned ourselves over to hedonism, to materialism, to this crazy woke culture, to a self-loathing. And the West needs to get its confidence back, and we need to see a genuine Christian civilization grow up once more in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Europe. Let's hope that there is never another 9/11, and let's hope that the West wakes up and realizes what it has to do to fight against the threat that it faces from Islamism and jihadism. See you all soon.